Welcome back to the Hive Doctor, your beekeeping mentor. It's my job to take guesswork out of beekeeping for you. And especially this time of year, when we're getting our bees ready in the fall, going into the winter, there can be some guesswork. So today I'm going to go over 3 things, some little things that you can do that will make big differences. So stick around. You get it? Stick? Cause honey, sticky? Welcome back, beekeepers. Today we're going to go over 3 things, small things that you can do that will make big differences in getting your bees prepared for the winter time. The first thing I want to cover today is going to be something called a quilting box. That's what I've got on top of my colony here. You see 2 ventilation holes. They're very similar to Vivaldi boards. Vivaldi boards and quilting boxes are both top ventilated boxes. The Vivaldi board, its primary use is to feed your bees fondant patties, pollen patties, if you want to do it that way. You could even modify it to be deep enough to be a top hive feeder for liquid feed if you wanted to. I don't do that with my bees, but I do utilize a quilting box, and it does exactly what it sounds like. It's like placing a quilt on your hive for the cool months so that it helps retain colony warmth. I've had years where I have used them. I've had years where I do not. And in the years I've used quilting boxes, my survival rates go through the roof. They just do way better. Even the colonies that did not really have the resources to make it through seem to be able to do it. So let's say you've got even the most optimum colony, a beautifully laying queen, a nice population, plenty of food stores. This is still going to increase their chances of making it, and it may even help for them to use less of their food stores. So I recommend a quilting box to everyone. I even use these in the warm months, but I remove the quilting feature, and that will make more sense in a minute when I show you the inside of it. Now, where I live in the North Georgia mountains, we don't have cold enough winters to need to wrap our colonies for the winter time. But if I did live up there, I would still incorporate a quilting box as well as wrap my colonies. So anywhere that you've got a moderate winter or colder, that would be a great climate to incorporate a quilting box. So let's go ahead and take a look. Let's pop this hive cover, look inside, and show you exactly what I mean and how to set it up, the little small things that will make a big difference. Popping our hive cover, we see that we've got a quilting box on top with cedar shavings inside that are not evenly distributed. That's because in moving this box around, at some point I tipped it forward and had not come back to redistribute this. So this is one of my winter preparation steps because these chips are still left over from last winter. So what we want to do is make sure that we get cedar shavings or something else that's not going to mold. Cedar really resists rot. That's what makes it a great chip for this kind of process because they're going to get wet. Now, one of the things you need to keep in mind is that a quilting box is a ventilated box. And I've got holes, 3 holes on my sides, 2 holes on my ends, and they're all stapled over with some screen wire so that nothing can access this box. This is just for this and to maintain warmth. Now for this to really work, you've got to have some kind of center hole right here where the heat of the colony or the moisture from their heat rises through this and enters into these chips. These chips then condensate as that heat touches the cold in this box. That condensation becomes wet. That's where these ventilated holes come in because air will enter and wick away that moisture. I've actually got too many chips in this box. You don't want to fill up a quilting box to where the quilting material blocks the ventilation holes. They need to be above the level of your cedar chips, and the cedar chips need to be slightly below the level so they're not blocking ventilation from happening. And the other thing is, since this is a used one, the bees have propolized this hole over the summertime, so it's important to scrape that back off for winter. Just a thin layer of propolis, just scraping it nice and careful, tossing it to the side. And And I don't know what size hole this is, and you could actually do multiple holes. This is probably a 2-inch diameter hole, and it's got screen over it as well. So I just lightly cover that. And then I make sure that the rest of the chips are distributed evenly, especially over where the cluster of the bees is going to be. They're not going to be so much in the corners, but I like to cover it all. And now this is set up properly for the winter time. Now another way to manage a quilting box, those cedar chips are the quilting medium that's used in the cold months. When it starts to get warm, and what I mean by warm, like in the spring is when our daytime highs are easily in the low 60s at least, and the bees fly first thing in the morning pretty much. I would come along and remove those cedar chips, saving them for use later, but now I've got an empty quilting box, an empty ventilated cavity on top that, in my opinion, helps the bees to ventilate their colony, and it also creates a buffer from the heat of the sun. So it's not hitting directly on the top cover and the top box, whatever that might be, or whether it's a brood box or a honey super. Now the reason my quilting boxes are so shallow is because I'm able to cut 3 of them out of a 1x12. So I'm just going for efficiency there, and I've found that this depth of a box works just fine for me in my area. But if you're in a colder climate, you might want to consider a deeper box. Okay, so let's go on to the second thing, a small thing to remember that will make a big difference in your colony winter survival rate. And that is this, especially when we are beginners. When we see late into the year our food sources coming to a halt for our bees, we kind of freak out. Do our bees have enough? I don't know. Do they need pollen? Should I feed them? Should I give them pollen patties? One of the important things to remember here is, as a beekeeper, we want to mimic nature. We want to pay attention to what it is doing, not necessarily what the beekeeping community is doing, because that's not always right. So my point here is, watch, and in your area, when the natural pollen sources come to a stop, it's important. It signals to the colony, to the queen especially, that she needs to lower her egg laying rate even more, so that the food stores they do have, they know that it will supply and feed the mouths that they already have. I don't give any pollen patties to my bees after the natural pollen sources have come to an end. Because to the bees, if I give them that pollen patty source, they're going to think, oh, we still have incoming, we still have resources, and they're going to continue that egg laying rate, thinking they'll be able to support it. They'll be able to support plenty of it, which actually isn't the case. We want bees to go into a true winter mode, and part of that is lowering the population. Not big time, but compared to our summer populations, it is big time. We need them to come into a winter cluster that they can manage with the food resources that they were able to gather and save for that winter. Try to avoid the impulse to give your bees pollen patties when pollen is not naturally coming in already. Let that be a sign to you as the beekeeper. I need to read the season so that I can best serve my bees. All right, so the third, final, small tip that will make a big difference if you use screened bottom boards, which I haven't always done. Perhaps you're not doing it, but I highly recommend, because it's just one of the many steps that helps us beekeepers help our bees when it comes to battling Varroa mite. These girls naturally groom themselves, and when they do, the mites fall off. You've got what's called mite drop, and they fall through those screen bottom boards onto the ground without any hope of ever getting back into that colony, hopefully. Their chances are pretty slim. So, throughout most of the year, our screen bottom boards are open to the ground. But a good screen bottom board is going to come with grooves that takes a slider board. And I've made my screen bottom boards to do the same. So there's a time in the year where it's time to put these back in and close up the bottom of that screen bottom board so that it keeps out the cold, harsh winds that can come up into the colony. It's like closing the windows on your house on a windy day. It just brings a certain calm, helps even out the temperature, and in the case of our bees, it helps them maintain a more consistent temperature within the colony with less fluctuations between hot and cold. Bees have this supernatural way of being able to turn on the heat when they need to as a cluster in the wintertime. It's surprising how amazing they can do. I once was running several queen raisers. They were 3-frame nukes, and I had no intention of wintering any of them, but it just happened to be that way. And those 3-frame nukes, they didn't have much, but they actually made it through the wintertime. And that's a good 3 or 4 months of some solid cold. I was surprised because I'd never tried that before. I was new to Georgia from being a Florida beekeeper where we virtually don't have winter down there. So it taught me what bees are capable of. Be aware in your area when you should be putting these slider boards on. Right now, our daily highs are in the 60s, low 70s, and our nights are in the 40s and 30s. To me, I'm not doing much more. I'm pretty much done with my mite treatments. So I'm gonna go ahead and start going around in my yard and sliding these under, blocking that cold wind from coming up into my colonies. All right, so that's the 3 things, small but big, make a big difference. And it's way easier than trying to knit a sweater for each and every one of your bees. It just doesn't work. They don't make thread that small. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Tell your friends about the Hive Doctor, drop me one of these, and I'll see you in the next video.